So before we get too far into painting, I wanted to talk a little bit further about your file setup and being able to start with your outlines. In many cases, students resort to painting their outlines in Photoshop. If you're not familiar with Illustrator or you don't have a tablet, Photoshop is going to work perfectly fine for your outlines. So I've got a few student examples that I will walk through just to help illustrate the concept of using outlines. In this example, the student did use a screenshot as a basis for her illustration. So when we ask you to go search for screenshots or captures from the actual movie or TV show, they can potentially help you illustrate from these images. So in this case, this student did actually work from this illustration, and she was able to illustrate further. And a lot of her work's actually in smart objects in many more layers than what you see here. I do have another student example here where we've got, this is the finished product, but we do have outlines here that we're going to be able to work from. And you will be able to see that this is very basic. It's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be a quick illustration, and the purpose of outlines is to help you be able to select things. So once we have the basics of our outlines together, we're going to be able to use either the quick selection or the magic wand tool. And you're going to want to select your outlines. From there, we're going to be able to choose a small area or perhaps a larger area and just click, and you guys will notice as we zoom in, it's a little bit hard to see, but there are little selection dancing ants going on around that area. And if that is happening, that means that we can now do stuff inside of there that will allow us to paint what we want to be able to paint. Okay, so with that said, we can now just dump color inside of there, and that's going to be a lot quicker. So when we create outlines, the purpose in the beginning is not to add every little detail. The purpose is to create areas that are easy to select so that we can start putting color inside of it, and then from there we can actually paint even further with paintbrushes, which we'll learn a lot more about soon. Now in this example, I'm going to deselect. It is very easy to forget when you have things selected, and if you do have things selected, when you go to do anything else, it is a little bit more challenging. So I'm going to hit Command D. If you forget that selection option right here is deselect. Okay, so we want to deselect real quick. I'm going to create another layer, and we're going to talk about outlines just a little bit further. So if you decide to use Photoshop to create your outlines, you're going to get a brush tool, like one of your brushes, by activating the brush tool, and you do not want to use the pencil tool. Okay, so I know Photoshop does have a pencil. Do not think of it like that's your rough draft. Photoshop's pencil tool is not going to be as user-friendly as your brush tool. So we basically come in here and choose some different options. Now, some things that you want to be aware of. First of all, the brush size, and I know you guys have learned how to change that, but usually when you create outlines, they are going to be somewhere between probably 2 and 4 pixels wide. And then the hardness of the brush is really crucial when you are painting outlines. So for your outlines to make it easy for them to be selectable, it's going to be really important to keep them as a hard-edged brush. And then from there, we want to make sure everything's 100% opacity and 100% flow. So what makes things super easy to select is if we have a harsh black and white contrast. Anytime we do, if we have a closed shape, we're going to be able to select inside of it. So I am doing this from let me change this to black and white, from a laptop. So it's a little bit more tough to draw from because I don't have an actual mouse or pen. And you will notice though that this is going to be a very easy shape that we're going to be able to select. Now do notice that this is a little bit thicker than this option here because I chose 4 pixels. So you do probably want to test out different sizes and see what works best for you. But now from there we're going to be able to choose this magic wand, and we're on layer 12, so we can select inside of it and then I would add another layer, and then we can just dump the color that we want inside of it. It would help if I use my paint bucket tool. Let's come back to that layer again. So it is easy to get mixed up with layers. I know that I've done that a few times before, where I'm on one layer and then move to another layer. Let's make sure we're on the right layer. There it goes. And then we can either use a paint bucket or a paintbrush. So I'm going to go back to this new layer I created and put it inside of that area. And then of course we can change the order of layers, and we can paint even further to perfect things. So with that said, that's going to help you fill larger areas of color, and it's going to be a lot quicker than taking a brush and just literally going back and forth and painting like you're painting in a coloring book. So you do want to make sure you understand how to create outlines. It is going to be important for you to choose your different brush widths and test them out pretty early on and decide the style that you're going for as you start painting. I do have one other example here, and this is just one additional one. And again, you can use slightly different style brushes, but this is another example of outlines. And if we just go ahead and show the rest, we can bring it all back. And you can see how that's going to be able to help us paint in specific situations. So that outline serves the purpose of helping us not only create the figure, but to be able to paint so that we're able to fill shapes, so that we can bring this illustration all the way together. So hopefully that helps you get started with outlines in Photoshop. It is going to take a lot of exploring with the brush tool, but just keep in mind that you do want to make sure your brush is the size that you need it, so somewhere usually between 2 and 4 pixels. The hardness is going to be 100%, and the opacity and flow are usually 100% as well.